On the 14th of October, 2025, Microsoft killed Windows 10. No fanfare, no grace period for the people who weren't ready, no extension for the hundreds of millions of users whose computers simply didn't qualify for what came next. The deadline hit, the security updates stopped, and Microsoft pointed everyone toward Windows 11, an operating system that required hardware many perfectly good machines didn't have, demanded a Microsoft account just to get to the desktop, and came preloaded with an AI assistant that nobody voted for. That was the choice Microsoft offered. Upgrade to something that might not run on your PC, pay $30 a year just to stay safe on the one you already owned, or buy a new computer entirely. And on that exact same day, a small company based in Dublin, Ireland, launched a free Linux operating system called Zorin OS 18 and pointed it directly at every person Microsoft had just left behind. Within 5 weeks, 1 million people had downloaded it. Over 78% of those downloads came from Windows devices, not from Linux enthusiasts looking for a new hobby, from Windows users who had reached their limit. And the deeper you look at how this happened, the worse Microsoft's situation gets, because by April 2026, the CEO of Microsoft was standing in front of investors admitting the company needed to win back its own fans. That is not a product pivot. That is a confession. Let's talk about what actually happened here. The 14th of October, 2025, was not a surprise. Microsoft had been announcing the Windows 10 deadline for years, but knowing a wall is coming does not make hitting it feel any better. On that date, Microsoft officially ended support for Windows 10 Home, Pro, and Education editions. No more security updates, no more patches, no technical assistance. If your computer ran Windows 10 and nothing else, it was now in the same vulnerable position as a house with unlocked doors, technically still standing, but exposed to anything that wanted to walk in. Microsoft's official answer was the Extended Security Updates program. For consumers, that meant $30 a year to keep receiving critical patches. Or, if you were willing to sign in with a Microsoft account and sync your PC settings to the cloud, you could get the first year for free. Stop and think about that for a second. The price of security on a computer you already paid for was either money or your data. Those were the options Microsoft built. That is not a solution. That is a toll booth in front of your own front door. But that would only be a frustrating policy story. The hardware wall is where it becomes something bigger. Analyst firm Canalys estimated in December 2023 that approximately 240 million PCs could not meet Windows 11's hardware requirements. 240 million. That is roughly the population of Brazil. These were not ancient machines collecting dust in a garage. These were laptops from 2017 and 2018. Computers that still browsed the web, ran spreadsheets, played video, handled video calls, computers that worked. Microsoft did not make them slow. Microsoft made them ineligible. That is a completely different thing. The gate keeping them out was a security chip called TPM2, along with a CPU generation cutoff that excluded processors older than Intel's 8th generation and AMD's Ryzen 2000 series. Microsoft framed the requirement as a security necessity, and TPM2 does have genuine security benefits: hardware-backed encryption, protection against firmware attacks, secure boot support. The technology itself is not a scam. But the way the line was drawn blocked capable machines not because they were insecure, but because they predated Microsoft's chosen cutoff. There is a difference between a security policy and a hardware replacement policy, and for millions of users, this felt like the second one dressed up as the first. Environmental advocates and analysts at PIRG estimated this transition could generate around 1.6 billion pounds of additional PC e-waste, a projected figure, a modeled scenario, not an audited count, but one that tells you the scale of what was being thrown away. Microsoft, for its part, had published a sustainable software blog advising developers to build software that runs on existing devices to reduce waste. The company asking others to be responsible while engineering the largest forced PC obsolescence event in modern computing history is exactly the kind of thing that makes people permanently angry. So, users had a dead operating system, a hardware wall, a fee to stay safe, and a company telling them to buy something new. That would already be enough to explain what happened next. But it gets worse. Because for the users whose machines did qualify for Windows 11, what they got was not exactly a gift. Windows 11 Home, starting from version 22, H2, made a Microsoft account mandatory during initial setup. No account, no desktop. The local account path, the simple offline option that had existed in Windows since people started using Windows, was not removed with an explanation. It was buried, hidden, and then slowly closed off entirely as workarounds were patched out one by one. Microsoft progressively removed the bypass commands that tech-savvy users had found. Reports from June 2026 indicate the latest Patch Tuesday update closed, yet another workaround. This is not accidental. Microsoft has been systematically making the local account path harder with every update. To set up a computer you paid for in your own home, to do your own work, Microsoft wants your email address. No account, no PC. The telemetry situation compounds everything. On Windows 11, Home and Pro, users can reduce diagnostic data collection to a required level through settings. That is the lowest option available to them. Only Enterprise and Education editions offer a near-zero setting called Security. Regular home users do not get that switch. The slider exists, but it does not go all the way. Microsoft controls the floor. You are permitted to care about your privacy, but only up to the point where it stops interfering with Microsoft's collection. And then Windows 11 comes loaded. Ads in the Start menu for Microsoft 365, Xbox Game Pass, and third-party apps placed there by Microsoft or its OEM partners. A lock screen that occasionally functions as promotional real estate. Default browser resets to Edge after certain updates. A behavior so consistent and persistent that users across forums describe it as an ongoing battle. Prompts to try Copilot. Prompts to try OneDrive. Prompts to connect your phone. A fresh Windows 11 installation does not feel like a clean start. It feels like a store that already knows what it wants to sell you. Mandatory account. Telemetry you cannot fully disable. Copilot in the taskbar. Ads in the Start menu. Edge reset every few weeks. Prompts to try Microsoft 365. A lock screen that occasionally looks like an advertisement. And underneath all of it, a chip requirement that said your perfectly good laptop does not qualify anymore. That is the environment Microsoft created. And that is why the Copilot story matters as much as it does. Between September 2025 and March 2026, Microsoft automatically installed the Microsoft 365 Copilot app on Windows machines running Microsoft 365 without users choosing to install it. People opened their computers and found a new AI tool waiting for them on their work machines, with access to their files and calendars. No prompt, no permission, no opt-in. The rollout was eventually paused after backlash grew, including reported bugs suggesting Copilot could access confidential emails, a claim that surfaced in user and press reporting and that Microsoft addressed as a bug, not an intentional feature. The company resumed the forced Copilot rollout in June 2026, targeting commercial users with a July 1 completion target. The question that rollout planted in people's minds is the one that does not go away. If Microsoft can install something on my machine without asking, what else can it install? When trust breaks that way, it does not come back from a settings menu. A company confident in its products does not need to force them onto computers at night. That is not software you chose. That is software that chose you. That alone would be enough to generate headlines for a week. But the privacy side goes even deeper. Windows Recall is a feature Microsoft introduced for its Copilot Plus PC hardware tier. It works by taking periodic screenshots of everything on your screen to build a searchable history of your activity so that Copilot can help you find things you were looking at days or weeks ago. Banking information on screen, personal messages, medical searches, work documents, all of it captured, indexed, searchable. Microsoft's official position is that Recall stores everything locally, encrypted, gated behind Windows Hello authentication, and never sent to Microsoft's servers. That is the company's documented stance, and it should be taken seriously. But the concern from security researchers and privacy advocates was never primarily about Microsoft lying. It was about what the design created. A database of everything you have ever done on your computer, sitting on your hard drive, readable by any malicious software with administrator access. Apps like Signal and Brave implemented countermeasures before Recall even launched publicly, because their developers understood that a screenshotting AI layered into the OS changes the threat model for everyone. After the backlash, Microsoft made Recall opt-in rather than opt-out. That was a concession. A company confident in a feature does not make it opt-in after launch unless the reaction was bad enough to force a retreat. But here's the part people don't focus on enough. Even with Recall opt-in, even with the telemetry slider set to required, even with Copilot hidden in a drawer, Windows 11 still defaults to engagement over privacy. The feature that a normal person actually gets on a normal home or pro installation without digging through settings is a system that is collecting data, showing promotions, and waiting for you to agree to the next thing Microsoft wants to add. The privacy toggle is not enough when surveillance is the default. And this is exactly where a small operating system from Dublin started looking like something much bigger than an alternative OS. Zorin OS 18 launched on the 14th of October, 2025, same day Microsoft ended Windows 10 support. The timing was deliberate. The Zorin Group's own launch post referenced the 240 million PCs left behind by Windows 11's hardware requirements. They were building for those people. Zorin OS 18 runs on hardware that needs just 2 GB of RAM, 15 GB of storage, and a basic 64-bit processor. That is the minimum. The computer Microsoft said was dead. Zorin OS is supported on that machine with security updates until at least June 2029, 4 years of free support. On hardware, Microsoft pointed at the landfill. There is no Microsoft account required, ever. No Copilot, no Recall, no AI photographing your screen. The Zorin Group states on their official website that Zorin OS doesn't collect personal data, and, because the code is open source, anyone can verify that. Some anonymous aggregate statistics may be collected. But this is not the same category as Windows telemetry. The difference between we count installations and we collect your activity at a level that home and pro users cannot fully disable is not a minor distinction. It is the entire argument. The desktop looks like Windows. Taskbar at the bottom. Familiar layout. Start menu equivalent in the lower left. Zorin understood something important. Nobody wants to relearn computing from scratch. They just want a computer that behaves like it belongs to them. The difference is what is absent. No account prompt when you boot for the first time. No AI watching the screen. No ad suggestions in the menu. No timer running on your security. Just a desktop, waiting for you to tell it what to do. Zorin OS 18 also includes Wine 10, the compatibility layer that allows many Windows applications and games to run directly on Linux. The Zorin Group said in their official release notes that this version brought significant improvements for running Windows native apps. The escape hatch does not mean abandoning your software. It means many of the apps you were afraid to leave behind come with you. And on older hardware, users are reporting something that probably makes Microsoft uncomfortable. Their laptops run faster on Zorin than they did on Windows 10. Less background load. No AI workload running constantly. Faster boot. More of the hardware doing what the user asked instead of what the operating system decided it needed. No prompts. No AI. No forced account. Just a computer. Doing what you told it. The numbers are not subtle. In the first 2 days after launch, Zorin OS 18 hit 100,000 downloads. By the time the Zorin Group made their November 2025 announcement, the total was over 1 million downloads in just over 5 weeks, 78% from Windows devices. Tom's Hardware put it plainly. Over 780,000 Windows users skipped Windows 11 and went to Linux instead. These are not the Linux faithful switching distros. These are people who had used Windows for years, hit a wall they could not climb, and decided to walk around it. For context, the migration from Windows 10 to Windows 11 took 4 years to reach 50% adoption. Zorin hit 1 million downloads from Windows users in 35 days. Microsoft's own end-of-support deadline, its own hardware wall, and its own forced friction became the most effective recruiting campaign Linux has had in a generation. IT professionals were running the math. Enterprise extended security updates for Windows 10 were priced at $61 per device for the first year. The second year, $122. The third year, $244 per device. For an organization with a fleet of older machines, switching to Zorin OS is not a political statement. It is a budget decision. One city government quoted on Zorin's own official website said it expected to extend its PC lifespan by 30 to 40% by switching to Zorin OS because of the lower hardware requirements. That is not enthusiasm. That is math. Privacy advocates pointed to what Signal and Brave had done implementing code to protect their users from Windows recall before it even launched publicly, and said, "This is what happens when you can't trust the platform." Reddit threads and Linux forums filled up with people sharing installation screenshots, posting about how responsive their old laptops suddenly felt, asking how to migrate their files. Not power users. People who had been Windows users their entire computing lives and had finally found a reason to stop. Steam's hardware survey data showed Linux usage climbing slowly, but clearly with the Linux share hitting 3.58% on Steam during this period. Zorin OS 18.1, released in April 2026, added support for gaming handhelds, including the Asus ROG Ally and One X Player. The gaming gap that once made Linux a non-starter for a huge portion of users is narrowing every year. Proton compatibility, Steam's own investment in Linux gaming, and better driver support have changed what running Linux actually means for someone who wants to play games. And then the 29th of April, 2026 arrived. During Microsoft's fiscal third-quarter earnings call, Satya Nadella said this, and these are his actual words. "When it comes to our consumer business, we are doing the foundational work required to win back fans and strengthen engagement across Windows, Xbox, Bing, and Edge. Win back fans. Not improve, not enhance, not evolve. Win back. That is recovery language. You only need to win fans back when you have lost them." And the CEO of Microsoft used those exact words in front of investors while reporting a quarter where Windows OEM revenue had declined 2% year-over-year. A Windows Central survey from early 2026 found that 67% of Windows 11 users wanted the ability to completely remove Copilot, and 41% said AI features had made their computers feel slower. These are not fringe complaints from a tech forum. 2/3 of Windows 11 users want their operating system back. Microsoft is testing a quieter Windows and Insider builds fewer upsells during setup, a new privacy page that separates AI data controls from general telemetry. The company says it is going back to fundamentals: performance, quality, user trust. And buried in those same Insider builds, Microsoft is testing a mode that disables AI and telemetry services, and reports suggest that doing so improves battery life by up to 20% on older hardware. Read that again. Microsoft's own internal tests showed that disabling the features it forced onto users improved the battery life of those users' machines by up to 20%. That is not a side effect. That is the cost users were paying every day without being told. Every hour of reduced battery life, every slowdown, every moment where a laptop got warm for no obvious reason, that was the AI and telemetry working in the background, on hardware the user owned, doing things the user did not ask for. Microsoft quietly admitted this by testing a mode that removes it. That is the humiliation. Meanwhile, in April 2026, Germany's Consumer Protection Agency filed a formal complaint with the European Commission, arguing that Microsoft's account mandate and Copilot data collection practices may violate the Digital Markets Act. This is no longer just a user experience complaint. It is becoming a legal problem in the world's largest consumer market. Zorin OS 18 is not a perfect operating system. Linux compatibility gaps are real. Adobe Creative Suite has no native Linux version. Certain competitive multiplayer games block Linux clients through anti-cheat systems. There is a learning curve even when the desktop looks familiar. These limitations matter, and the future writer of any honest comparison should acknowledge them plainly. But those gaps are narrowing, and the question people are increasingly asking is not, is Linux as good as Windows, but is Windows worth the cost of staying? Not the financial cost. The cost in control. The cost in privacy. The cost in friction. The cost in being told your 5-year-old laptop is dead when it still runs fine. The cost in finding a new AI app on your work machine that you never installed? The cost of a slider that goes down but not all the way? Microsoft built the most successful operating system in the history of computing. Over a quarter century, it became so embedded in daily life that most people could not imagine computing without it. And then, over roughly 4 years, it made that platform feel less like a tool and more like a toll booth, one that wanted an account, an AI layer, a hardware upgrade, a subscription, a privacy trade-off, and eventually $30 a year just to stay safe. Not because the computer was broken, because Microsoft drew a line and your machine was on the wrong side of it. Zorin OS 18 is free. It runs on the computers Microsoft declared obsolete. It doesn't photograph your screen. It doesn't ask for your email address to let you through the front door. It will receive security updates until June 2029. A small company in Dublin, Ireland, built it and pointed it at the 240 million people Microsoft left behind. 780,000 of them responded in 5 weeks. And the CEO of Microsoft got on an earnings call and told investors his company needed to win back its fans. The question isn't whether Zorin OS beats Windows. The question is why Windows drove people to look. A trillion-dollar company with 1.6 billion active devices and the most recognized software brand in the world had to hear its own CEO say, "Win back," because it spent 4 years treating the people who trusted it like a market opportunity instead of like users. That is not a product problem. That is a values problem, and no insider build fixes that. You either build software that respects the person using it, or you build software that serves the company selling it. For a lot of people, that choice got made for them. They didn't switch to Linux because they loved Linux. They switched because Microsoft made Windows feel like it didn't belong to them anymore. Would you make the switch? Or is there still something keeping you on Windows? Let me know, because this is exactly the conversation Microsoft apparently stopped listening to.